If you follow the developments in crypto regulation, the SEC's March 17, 2026 interpretive framework deserves careful attention. On that date, the Commission released guidance addressing how federal securities laws apply to crypto and digital assets. So the framework introduces a more structured taxonomy for digital assets, a framework that addresses how common crypto activities fit within existing laws. And that reflects a more coordinated posture than we've seen in the past, particularly with the CFTC on jurisdictional boundaries and ways that those two agencies are working together and are kind of showing that they're on the same page. And in that vein, Director Maloney, in her accompanying statement, framed the release as an effort to provide clarity where market participants have long sought it. That is obvious, and anyone who's been in this space for a while understands that it's been a rough road. Some companies have went bankrupt trying to fight some of these regulatory battles. And she emphasized that the framework does not alter the underlying legal standard. Howey continues to govern, of course, but she acknowledged that the Commission's prior approach, which relied heavily on enforcement and case-by-case analysis, and I would say uneven case analysis and outcomes, left significant uncertainty for participants as to how that standard applied across evolving crypto market structures. To understand why this framework matters, it helps to begin with the underlying problem. And that's that the Howey test is always focused on reliance, but investors must be led to expect profits derived from a manager or the efforts of somebody else. And that formulation has remained unchanged since 1946. And what's always been clear is that in the crypto context, that analysis can change over time. And specifically, what happens once those efforts are completed or no longer meaningfully drive expectations of profit is that you get into a gray zone, right? And the March 17 framework addresses that directly. It explains that the investment contract may cease to exist when the managerial efforts that originally supported the investor expectations are fulfilled and fall away such that they no longer are material to the asset's value. And this is a notable clarification that sounds obvious, and I think for practitioners has been something we've been arguing for a long period of time. But it's that we want to recognize that there's this idea of a moment of sale when the transaction initially happens, and that relationship can evolve over time. And so the Commission also drew a clear distinction between the asset and the transaction, right? So the framework identifies several categories of crypto that are not in and of themselves securities, including digital commodities, digital collectibles, digital tools, certain payment stable coins. And at the same time, it made clear that a non-security asset can be sold as part of an investment contract depending on how it is offered and what it represents to investors. And this distinction has long existed in principle. Counsel has argued for them, but the framework has placed it at the center of the analysis here, and that focus leads directly to the role of representations. So the SEC has placed a significant standard on the representations that are made to token holders, users, investors, what have you, and that goes to the reliance factor of the analysis. So the team that's going to build, manage, or enhance the project in ways that drive value, those representations that they make can support a finding that an investment contract or security exists, but that can weaken over time or disappear altogether, right? And these elements create a more recognizable lifestyle that a project may begin with capital formation tied to specific representations about development or managerial efforts, but those efforts are then carried out, and then at some point they might conclude or become less central to the asset's value. And the framework suggests that at that stage, the investment contract analysis may shift. This doesn't eliminate judgment, but it does provide a more structured way to approach the question, is this token a security? When? right? And at what time and is it still? So the framework also reflects a consistent posture between the SEC and CFTC, which for years firms have navigated overlapping and sometimes competing regulatory theories. And the Commission's articulation suggests here a more defined division of responsibilities, with the SEC focusing on securities transactions and the investment contract analysis, and the CFTC focusing on commodities and related markets. They're no longer competing for jurisdiction, which is kind of how it felt under Gesmer. And so it's important, not to overread what the framework does. This is just interpretive guidance. I do think that it's important to take all of this with a grain of salt. The Howey standard does exist, and we have an SEC in the administration right now, that's taking these positions, that's providing clarity of kind of what we can expect at minimum. But we continue to have to kind of keep our head on a swivel and see how things moving forward, and how the application of this guidance can potentially be codified, be added to legislation, that we could have some rulemaking. That would be nice. I think the broader point should be framed carefully. The record supports saying that, for several years, crypto regulation has developed through enforcement actions and informal rulemaking, right, rather than a real framework. And this does represent a shift towards at least a more structured and transparent articulation of what the Commission's approach is. There's still some uncertainty, but I do think it narrows certain questions and should provide for a better environment to build, because that's really what it's all about. So if you're building something and you want some advice, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My name is Braeden Anderson. I'm a partner at Gesmer Updegrove. That's all I got for now. See ya.